We thank you. That's reassuring, isn't it? I'm glad somebody's paying attention. So 1983 was the 300th anniversary of German settlement in the United States. That's the founding of Germantown, Pennsylvania. And so a group of us decided, well, by golly, we need more than a year to celebrate and to really investigate and understand. That's what it is, because for the most part, it was a terra incognita for many of us. What is the German heritage of Indiana? Well, we discovered it's very, very deep and very, very broad, which includes New Harmony. Well, missionaries coming in way before statehood, when it was territory. And then before statehood, we had the founding of New Harmony, Indiana, which was a German Protestant radical commune, which was there for 10 years. And then they sold out lock, stock, and barrel. But they were replaced by thousands and thousands and thousands of German families and individuals, not coming in as a commune, but individuals who settled in throughout Indiana, and including my family settling in southeastern Indiana before the Civil War. The Indiana German Heritage Society, our goal is to learn and investigate, share that information, and then by golly, to share it and celebrate it, because we have a lot to celebrate. And part of that celebration is this place right here, Kurt Vonnegut, who was one of us, and he said so. He said that he was. So our speaker tonight, oh, and by the way, Dr. White has some of these flyers. So some of you who aren't members, I'm going to say like they say on PBS, please join. Please join. So we have these. And if you're not a member, join. We're also participating in the Chris Kindle Markt up in Carmel. Our next meeting, we have a program every month. It's called the Stammtisch. Stammtisch is German word for the regular table. So regularly, except for 2 months, we have a program dealing with different aspects of German heritage, Indiana German heritage. The G word's in there someplace. That's the connector. So our next meeting will be the 15th of December, which is not a Wednesday, but it's actually a Thursday. And we'll be at the Chris Kindle Markt up way up there in Carmel. And what we're going to do is sing the best Christmas songs ever, which means there's no mention of Rudolph. Even though he's German, there's no mention of Santa Claus, and there's no mention of Frosty the Snowman or Mrs. Claus. And you know what? He's not really married. They made up the made up. So we're going to do that. We take a break in January, and in February, we're going to have our speaker who is right here with us, Inga Davies. She's going to speak about a famous architect, not Vonnegut, another famous architect by the name of Bruno Schmitz, who is the architect of our wonderful Indiana Soldiers and Sailors Monument, and then became the greatest monument designer in Wilhelmine, Germany. And then in March, we'll have a speaker who is speaking on the Hook and Hag drugstores, both with German names, which became staple drugstore chains in central Indiana, all over central Indiana. Enough of that. I want to introduce the speaker.
When's the annual meeting?
Annual meeting is
March 17th and 18th.
17th and 18th March. Well, they can join us if they want. We're not exclusive. You don't have to be German to join this outfit. All you have to do is wish you were German. No. All you have to do is be interested in the topic. I don't care who you are. It doesn't matter. Intellectual curiosity. That's the key here. Speaking of that, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Julia Whitehead. She is a good friend of mine. Julia Whitehead, I admire her. I should put her up on a pedestal here because this was her vision. And maybe other people had it, but she's the one that acted on it. And to act on it was Kurt Vonnegut was a great man. Kurt Vonnegut is from Indianapolis. Kurt Vonnegut wrote about being from a German family in Indianapolis. He wrote about it. It's not something that I'm interpreting from his writing. He says it loud and clear. Julia thought, boy, this is weird. He's Indianapolis, Indianapolis, Indianapolis. And you come here to Indianapolis, so where's the Vonnegut? Where's the Vonnegut? The hardware store, which lasted 5 generations. It's a parking garage now. That's the site of it. And his family, his grandfather and the father were both architects that contributed greatly to the built environment of this city, including, now you got to be old timers to remember this, L.S. Ayers and Company. Raise your hand if you know what that means. All right. And how about William H. Block Company? Okay. That firm designed both department stores, and one was #1 and the other was #2 in the city. Great institutions, capitalist institutions here in the city, and those buildings are still beautiful. So she got into her head, man, I got to do something. And I admire her so much for that, because she has built this up and brought the organization here into its permanent home, which is a German building, by the way. Wilhelm Handel had his bar, and his family lived above the bar here, and which just puts layer upon layer, because he probably knew the Vonneguts. I mean, it was a small town, really. Now, just today, I was reading the latest issue. Sorry, I said it's the September 26th. I got these all over the house. It's the New Yorker. They're so hard to read because articles are so long. But anyway, I was reading this and I thought, wow, this is perfect. I'm going to read you just a passage here because it ties to our topic and what she is addressing. So it's a short story. Jacob turned to come up with a topic of conversation with his grandfather. Quote, Mom says you like Kurt Vonnegut. End of quote. His mother had told him this a couple of years before when she noticed him reading one of Vonnegut's books. Who? Kurt Vonnegut. I don't know what you're talking about, Granddad Jay said impatiently. He had probably read the books when they first came out, and maybe that was so long ago that he had forgotten them. He wrote Slaughterhouse-Five, Jacob said. The Sirens of Titan, the grandfather replied, I can't understand you, as he said even more loudly. He sounded agitated. It's okay, said Jacob, who knew from his own experience that what confusion was like. So I'll end up with confusion, but she is going to unconfuse us. My friend and my idol, Julia Whitehead.
Thank you, my friend.
Don't forget, you got to cut the cake.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
absolutely. That's what many folks are waiting for. So welcome. Raise your hand if this is your first time in the building. Wow. Okay, I'm going to talk about 3 things. Myself. I'm going to talk about the organization, and I'm going to talk about Vonnegut. And we are so fortunate to have a couple of Vonnegut scholars. Wait, Beth Ann.
I'm just going to the other side to take pictures.
Oh, let me just take this opportunity to thank Zach and Beth Ann for the hard work that you do for the Vonnegut Library. We're very fortunate to have you. Thank you, Abby. As you can tell, we rent the building for parties, weddings, all kinds of events, and we've really picked up this year, haven't we?
We definitely have. I'm already booking into 2023. So if you are thinking about a birthday party or a wedding or a book club, you might want to get in touch with me soon.
And this place, we feel as a staff, we're not like any other place. You go to, well, I'm not going to name names, but this building belongs to you all. It belongs to the public. It belongs to us. And I don't know any other place where staff can feel like this is home. Lock up and go when you want. This is your place, because that is the kind of place that we think Kurt Vonnegut would want And so that's what we have. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for choosing our venue for this event tonight. So I said I was going to talk about myself. My paternal grandfather on both sides of my family, they were both German Americans. So I had the Snyders. My maiden name is Snyder, Snyder. And then my mother's side was Seitz, Seitz. And so I know more about my German side. Well, I know a little bit more about my Irish side, I guess. Too. That's probably a dead giveaway. I don't know. And I got some Jewish in me, which people might find surprising, but I do, and I am. But so Vonnegut's German American heritage was so very important to him. I know many of you already know that. And he struggled sometimes with his war experience and connecting that with his German American roots. And I write about this a little bit in my book, Breaking Down Vonnegut, which came out this year. It was such a challenge for him to be captured by the Nazis when he went to serve as part of the Battle of the Bulge and was captured and taken by a train. Raise your hand if you've read Slaughterhouse-Five. Okay, so lots of people have. So that's good. You know, even though Billy Pilgrim is not Kurt Vonnegut, we know he is based on a young man named Ed Crone, who did not survive the war. And I talk about that in my book. But a lot of people think Billy Pilgrim is Kurt Vonnegut. Well, certainly his descriptions of what it was like to be on that train going to Dresden after being captured, the Royal Air Force strafing the train, that was exactly what Vonnegut saw. So all of those descriptions, the firebombing of Dresden, all of that he personally experienced and wrote about from, those recollections. But he also talked about Dresden being the Florence of the Elbe, and other things about Dresden that were so important to him. He suffered when he was asked, after the horrible firebombing of Dresden, when he was he was forced to bury all of the people who suffered that firebombing. And he talked about these children being Hansels and Gretels. And so for Vonnegut, we all are brothers and sisters, no matter what color or origin, what country you come from. And I love that about him. I love it that he chose to go fight the Nazis. He had pneumonia. He got out of the first draft because of that, but he wanted to serve his country. He saw himself as a German American, but an American. And it was really important for him to do his part. I also served as a military officer. It was the Clinton years, nothing like what Vonnegut went through. I didn't have any days that were like what he endured, although even peacetime can be challenging if you're a female Marine, for different reasons. But certainly he survived something horrendous. But he also was really proud of his German heritage. He was very proud of his family and his extended family here in Indianapolis. And so I could go on, but I'm going to take this opportunity to welcome up two colleagues who have made a tremendous difference in starting this organization, supporting me. They were the first people I called, along with Mark Vonnegut and Kip 2. Kip 2's local, Mark Vonnegut is in Massachusetts. But the day after I had the idea for this museum, I called these four guys in that day. And I said, here's what I'm thinking. And I was just this kind of worker bee at Eli Lilly. I had a bunch of different things in my past careers, but I didn't know how to get anything done in the city. And I certainly didn't know anything about being a Vonnegut scholar. I was just a regular reader. And so I thought, okay, well, let me get the Indianapolis guy. That's Kip 2. Let me get Mark Vonnegut, son of Kurt Vonnegut. and then these two gentlemen. So Mark Leeds, Rodney Allen. I don't know anybody else in the world who are more known for being Vonnegut scholars than these two gentlemen. And you have been with me from day one of this idea. So please come on up. Mark is from New York City. Rodney is from Natchitoches, Louisiana. Thank you for being with us. And please share with us anything you would like to share about Vonnegut, his German heritage, or anything else, I think.
Well, Mud and Jeff, we are happy to be here tonight to welcome you here. Thanks for coming. It has been an amazing ride, and it's come to fruition. And this is exactly what Julia talked about early on and what Kurt talked about throughout his life. We need artificial families in addition to our biological families, associations of people, unions, readers circles, and on and on. He imagined in the future it might be necessary to have about 8 names that were throughout the then future United States, or they would have odd names, so that if you move to a new city, you could just look in the phone book and the chromiums. Chromium 9, is that what they were?
I can't remember. There are too many names.
Yeah.
That's why I wrote.
So you could just call them and ask them for money, because, hey, I'm a chromium, you're a chromium. And he said they might not give it to you, but at least you'd have somebody to call. So you can always call the Vonnegut Library. Call us what you will, but call us. Yeah, I've had 2 very weird coincidences in my life that brought me here tonight. Of course, one is that Mark recommended me. So thanks for that, Mark.
It was
Just one of many,
had to be.
one of many good things you've done for me. But I wasn't a Vonnegut scholar. I was a Southern boy, so I was writing about Robert Van Warren and Faulkner, and I don't know if you know the name Walker Percy, but he won the National Book Award for his first novel, A Moviegoer. And so I started, my first book was about him, and then my editor at the University Press of Mississippi, one named Sita Srinivasan, one of my handful of most important mentors in my life, most of whom have been women, said, I think you should do this book in our series about the best interviews of American literary artists. And I think you would be really good for the Kurt Vonnegut, one of those, a series of those books. And I said, well, I'm not a Kurt Vonnegut scholar. I mean, yeah, I've read the standard stuff, but she said, well, I think you should consider it. So I said, well, let me read the novels that I haven't read. And I read those novels after Slapstick, which got disastrous reviews. And everybody was out to say that Vonnegut never was any good. He was just a hack writer, sci-fi writer, whatever. It was Jailbird and Galapagos and Bluebeard, Dead-Eye Dick. I said, these are great novels. They're not a sci-fi, except Galapagos maybe, but they're about history. They're about Watergate. They're about the danger of nuclear weapons. And they're also about the trials and tribulations of an artist who was a peripheral part of the modernist movement in painting. And I said, these are wonderful novels. And yeah, I'll do it. And then before I knew it, I was interviewing Kurt Vonnegut at his brownstone house on 48th Street for 3 hours and having the time of life. So that was a very serendipitous thing in my life. And Julia's call was another.
Well, and I need to excuse myself because we have a board meeting that starts at 8 o'clock. So I need to run upstairs and then Mark will carry it forward with some comments. But I know Bill is running to.
He wants to cut the cake.
Come on in.
What I want you to do is to cut the cake.
Okay,
Few
happy
pieces
to
of
do
pie.
that.
So here is the cake made up at Needler's Supermarket. It says KV, we know who that is, then 100 Jahre, 100 years. And that big day is just on Friday,
Yes, and that's
11/11.
11/11, and at 11 a.m. on 11/11, we will be doing a worldwide live stream on our website, but we're also going to have, I mean, if you can come back, please do, because we have Vonnegut. It's an all-day, all kinds of Vonnegut crazies, like this guy who has a Vonnegut license plate, the New York Vonnegut license plate. But people with their Vonnegut tattoos and their rare books and their everything, if you can come back Friday, we would love to have, and that includes Saturday as well. As I cut this, please do pay your membership dues as official members of this organization. For our organization, if you are not currently a member of the Vonnegut Library, we would like to provide you all with a one-year free membership. So please see our staff at the desk as you head out. We'd love to be able to do that. We think Kurt Vonnegut would appreciate you being members of the Vonnegut Library.
But you got to say it like this, please join.
Okay, so thank you so much for joining us. If I had some champagne, I would be toasting.
We have beer.
Toasting
We have beer.
And
German
beer. I'm sure he would be very happy with that. So thank you again. So this is Bill, and I'm serving it to you.
Well, you should have, because you can eat it during
I'm
the
not
board
gonna
meeting.
serve a piece of cake to myself first. That doesn't.
After you get yours, I'll go ahead and cut the rest of it for you.
Oh, thanks again. So yeah, thanks again for joining us. And Mark, I'm sorry, I have to rush off. Mark.
That's okay.
Mark he wrote the Vonnegut Encyclopedia, which has two versions of that, a more recent update with more of his more recent work included. And that is we sell this stuff in the store. Rodney's books, Understanding Kurt Vonnegut and Conversations with Kurt Vonnegut. Buy the books from the store. Buy my book. Get it. Sign it. $10. Signatures are free.
Right.
Anyway, thank you so much. I'm sorry I have to dash off. I hope you enjoy and thank you.
Well, while the cake is being served, would you like to say some more words?
I would
Because
like to
we
say
want to hear
something.
about that encyclopedia. That sounds great.
Oh, I'd like to talk about it.
And then after you've consumed the cake, special treat. This keeps going on. This goes on. Where is Zach? Zach's around. Zach's
hanging
right
out.
here. After we have our cake, after the speaker, we have the cake. Then Zach, who is here at the Vonnegut Museum and Library, he is going to give us a tour of all the exhibits and the facility here. So once you eat, don't run away on the full stomach. Stick around for part 2.
Thank you. This hat is because of Rodney. Because whenever we're together, it's the Mutt and Jeff Act. And nobody knows who I am. I'm just a little guy with him, but everybody knows who he is. So I'm this Mutt. I did this. And I don't know, do we have a book nearby? Yeah, would you please? I wrote Vonnegut Encyclopedia after first, well, I got his permission, and then he became a friend for 20 years. But when I was in graduate school, I had discerned up until that point a very basic structure that repeats in all of Kurt's works. And I told my major professor at the time that this is what I want to write about for my dissertation. And he said, he's still alive and writing. I said, that's not going to matter. He can't write a book without this. And which is kind of ballsy for somebody to say as a graduate student.
They're taking.
And he said, well, okay, oh, thank you. He said, so I ran down to him what I found, which I'm not going to tell you about now because I'm trying to make it into my next book.
I'll get these out of your way.
There you go.
This is the big book.
Yeah, this is what kept me in poverty. 33 years of work. So I wrote to my professor. He was on vacation, and I said to him, this is the idea. And because he was on vacation, I had to actually give him a real sketch of what the dissertation would be and the structure I had found in all of the novels. And he had insisted that this is kind of crazy because he's still alive and writing and very active. I had to get special permission in the English department at the University of Buffalo to write a dissertation about one guy who's still alive. And I was insisting that he can't write a novel without this particular structure. And as it turns out, I was right. He wrote a few more novels and the structure repeated. I'm actually a character in the last novel. I get to attend the clam bake with Kurt at a reunion with his alter ego, Kilgore Trout. So
Was I on the list?
no.
I was not on the list.
But
A friend of mine wrote Kurt and said, you need to put Rodney on the list because, you know, he's really broken up about it. And Kurt wrote back and he said, here's an official invitation to the clam bake, which has never happened, but may happen. in the future.
Right.
So just present this in your honor, yes.
so because I was writing my dissertation about all of the novels at that point, and there had been, I think, 11, it involved, of course, very close reading across all of the books to be able to draw out this particular structure. And so I'm realizing that I'm becoming familiar with all of these characters that reappear in the books, but they're not always the same. Their personalities are somewhat different, and their importance in different texts changes. Kilgore Trout himself has 2 different death dates. So that's just like a weird thing, but it's there. So I decided, as I looked up on my bookshelf, because my master's thesis was about Dickens. I can actually make the jump, but I'm not going to do that right now. But I remember I owned at the time the Dickens Encyclopedia by Michael and Molly Hardwick, which basically described, or it included the quote from each character's first reference by Dickens. And that was it. And I decided, because these books repeat characters, places, themes, and things like that, that I started with the Rolodex and wound up with 3 of them. I put down on each card every person, place, thing, and oftentimes concepts, everything from people to basements, which are very big in Vonnegut, by the way, and spiral staircases. And so I put this all down, and I wrote to Kurt after my dissertation was finished, because then I felt like I was real. And I said, I've been doing this dissertation, and he knew my major professor, who, by the way, was also of German heritage, Leslie Fiedler. And I said, this is what I want to do. And he wrote me back within the week. And he said, I give you permission. I have no idea why you would want to spend this much time on me. But if you have that much time, go for it. And I'm telling my lawyer to call you in the morning because you have my permission. Sure enough, at 8 o'clock the next morning, I get a call from Don Farber, his lawyer, who became my lawyer, for the book, and Kurt gave me free rein. I could do anything I wanted because there's extensive quoting in this. And the first edition was set up so that, let's use basements for a second. Every time the basements or underground habitats appear, such as an oubliette, I ran it through software that allowed me to show you in every book where the basements are mentioned, and I give you the line. And then when I did this one, Random House asked me to edit it so that I kept certain quotes. Other quotes are referenced by each book and by chapter, whereas the first edition, I had it down to page and line number because it was all based on first editions, including all of the reprints. So, so yeah, I had to rewrite this thing and then add the other books to it. This is my daughter's brother. They grew up with this and me writing it. And this really, has been my life. And when Julia called me, it was at the end of a teaching day. I didn't know anybody knew who I was. And because I had some books at that point, but it was, who's thinking about Kurt Vonnegut like this? I didn't really know anybody that was doing that. She calls me up and she says, Dawn Farber said I should go. Okay. She told me what it was, what she wanted to do. And I thought, pie in the sky, but I'm in. And because this had already been my life up until this point. And I thought, I wrote this because I didn't want to have to remember everything. And I don't. I look it up, So, and I wanted that for other people so that if they're fans, if you read 2 novels, you already know that there are connections between the novels. And if you really wanted to understand the connections, that's what the encyclopedia was all about. So when Julia called, and I was still writing this particular edition, I thought it was the greatest idea and the craziest idea. And I never thought that she'd really get it off the ground. So she asked me for some people who might be interested. I knew of Rodney. I didn't know Rodney at the time. I knew of his book, Conversations with Kurt Vonnegut. And he bought into it right away too. And I was talking to Beth Ann the other day. Yesterday was your 3rd year anniversary?
Yes.
Right. And so she was talking about that was when the building was opened, this building, as opposed to where we had another place. And I started thinking and I said, I go back to a phone call. I remember when the Athenaeum gave Julia an office. It was the most cramped room with like a dormer window above it. But so I remember this really just went from conception into we own the building. And I think it's great that the thing I get most out of Kurt, because I'm from Brooklyn, I grew up angry. And if you're really wondering about it, I just happened to be wearing this shirt today, Forever Brooklyn. But Kurt got me to understand and to think about just common decency. And that should be the legacy of what we leave behind, just leave things a little bit better and you found them. And I thought that was a great way to live. And, as a young parent at the time, I thought, what else do I want my kids to be other than decent and, contribute to society? So I think having the children helped me write the book, and writing the book helped me parent my kids because I was constantly being fed Kurt's themes. And though I'm still angry, I go to therapy. I do find that Kurt is the center of a storm that is so calm, I could never reach, but I want to. With what he had been through, which is just unimaginable. But it was real. And for him to find a way to express a manner of dealing with trauma that speaks across the board. And I have to say, I'm going to throw this one in. I finished the book, this edition of it, April 9th, 2013. April 10th, I went in for a surgery to resolve a birth defect. 59 years old at that point. And it was choking my aortic artery. The Miami surgeon screwed up. I wound up in a coma for 3 weeks, tracheotomy. Now I went through my own trauma. They woke me up. I lost 3 weeks of my life. And I tried to remember, it was a big month. What was it? I finished the manuscript on April 9th, and I said, this is overnight surgery. I'll be back in a couple of days. The book's late anyway. I'll just take another look at it before I send it off. No. Then I go into the coma. And at the second hospital they sent me to, I remembered I had written this, and I was supposed to send it to the publisher. So I sent it from my Google Drive from the hospital to Random House. And I felt like I had been through trauma. I came this close to never having this published. It was just a day, the day's difference. And so I'm now in that PTSD stage that Kurt always talked about. But mine wasn't war-based. It was, physical trauma induced. And I've now had 24 surgeries. I'm waiting for my 25th in the next 18 months. And how do I deal with it? Well, anger therapy and Kurt, just come back to the center and just realize shit happens to everybody. We all have different shit, but no one's getting out of here without pain, and no one here gets out alive. So you just have to find a way to center yourself. When you're strapped into bed for about 3 months, you have to give up. You have to find a way to center yourself. So my reading of Kurt since 2013 is so different because I understand PTSD in a way I could only project beforehand. I don't recommend this as for any of you to get a deeper understanding of Kurt Vonnegut, but it changed me in ways, that experience, it changed me in ways I came to appreciate Vonnegut that much more deeply. And I was so grateful that I spent nearly 33 years writing this through the second edition, because after those surgeries, my memory wasn't the same. So at least I, wrote it all down. And that's what I wanted, something as a record for myself and for everybody else, so that when they read a Vonnegut book, they realize, oh my God, it goes like this constantly. And what are the basic themes? Basic themes are to get through life with a little bit of humor, even when faced with tragedy, and to be decent. So he's become my therapy, but that's my story. But the book is available. And
if I could just say something, a lot of people say, well, Kurt Vonnegut was a writer for teenage boys. He was
right.
sci-fi, drawing cartoons in the book. And Mark and I are here to tell it over and over again that there is no more serious an adult writer
None.
than Kurt Vonnegut that I've ever read. Not Tolstoy, not Faulkner, not anybody. And Kurt has been wildly underappreciated in his native land
Absolutely.
of America. And he's much more recognized as a great, a truly, absolutely great artist in Europe. The people who've gone through the trauma of World War II, other wars.
Let's be careful about Europe though, because they're big into Jerry Lewis also.
I think that's just the French.
Right.
I don't think the Germans are.
Probably not.
I don't know, you guys. But if we seem to be on a mission, I think that's fair. That's one of our
Yeah.
organizing principles for our scholarly life.
Spread the word.
That we think that Vonnegut has the correct depth of experience, a profoundly rich imagination, a work ethic that was unparalleled. And when it came time to show what he was really about, when his sister Alice was dying of cancer, and Alice was his favorite, she was his sister.
She was his audience that he wrote for.
Yeah, I said I worked right for one person, sister. And then the news came that her husband had died that day in a freak commuter train accident. He was going into New York City. Somebody left a drawbridge open. The train car went into the Hudson and 48 people were killed, including her husband. And she was unfortunate enough to learn that just before she died, depending on him, of course, to take care of their 4 kids. Kurt adopted them all. He took them into his household. He was the sole provider, writing, living off of his writing, a very dicey situation for even the best of writers. And he took them on and he raised them. The youngest child went to a family in Alabama who were relatives because he was much younger than the other boys. And so, he doubled the size of his family in one day and just went on about his business.
And he really didn't make much money, certainly not to cover a family of that size until Slaughterhouse-Five, and that was 1969. So he was 47 when he made it. But he had the family since the 50s, and he struggled the whole time. But he kept with it.
Clawed his way through day after day, sitting at that desk. Questions? I mean,
What year did he die?
and he died in 2007.
Yeah.
He was coming down the steps of his brownstone, very close to the UN building on 48th Street in Manhattan. He was taking his little dog for a walk, and apparently the leash got tangled up. He hurt his long legs, and he fell out on the sidewalk and got a severe head injury. It was after about 3 weeks after that, and never really woke up.
There's an irony to this. Actually. He used to think the funniest joke was on a silent film that he had seen where the woman gets off a trolley or a bus horizontally.
No, that was a real thing that he saw here in Indianapolis.
I thought it was on
No,
film.
no. He and Alice.
Well, that's even more cruel
He-
because he witnessed it for real.
Yeah, he said that it was an icy
It was
day.
one of the
in-
best jokes
in
he had ever.
Icy day in Indianapolis. The bus skidded up to the sidewalk. He and his sister were right there looking. He said the doors flew up and then a woman came out horizontally, like shot from a cannon, fell into the ice. He said, my sister and I laughed our ass off. And the rest of the people ran over there, they were trying to help her and they were looking at us, like we were absolute psycho kids, kids today, where's the humanity?
He's all the slapstick in it.
So I wrote a kind of thing about his death. I call it Vonnegut in flight, because I can see him still flying,
Yeah.
headed for the concrete, but still flying. Cigarette in his mouth, maybe. Vonnegut in flight.
Yeah.
Other questions?
He kind of had conflicted ideas of his Hoosier
Oh, of course,
upbringing.
of course. I
Can you
mean,
talk to that? I know he
Uh,
loved his German heritage. I know he thought Indiana was a bit backward, but I
Well,
think he came to terms. with it.
yeah, well, he got out as soon as he was an adult
Yeah.
and never came back there.
Well, his family had trauma. I mean, his
Oh,
parents.
Absolutely.
mother committed suicide on Mother's Day, 1944.
And Kurt,
He had just come back from Camp Atterbury. And his sister Alice tried to wake up their mother. Kurt walks in, early in the morning, it's only 40 miles away. And tries to wake her up, and he realizes she's gone. There's pills there, there's booze. And, the family tried to hide it because of the shame.
and her name was Edith, and she was from a very wealthy brewery family. Lever, yeah,
Right.
here in town. And, married to a very wealthy and successful architect. Supposedly their wedding was the biggest one ever thrown in the history
At
of
that point, it was the biggest wedding ever thrown in Indianapolis. So,
They said so many people got so drunk that they stayed for a week in the hotel before they could leave and go back home. That must have been a doozy.
that's what you do when you own a brewery.
So then prohibition,
Well,
and then depression.
Right.
You can't be an architect.
The money is dried up, but Edith
Nobody was building, the hardware store fell on. hard
Edith
times.
could not accept that they were no longer absolutely rich.
Well, that's
So,
why he had to go to public school, which he did appreciate.
Right.
Shortridge landed in a really good spot. Shortridge.
He thinks that was a turning point for him. He got a chance to write every day on the school newspaper, found a voice. And he continued that when he went to Cornell, as briefly as it was. He wasn't really interested in being a student. But he did know how to be an artist.
It wasn't all good at Shortridge. Some of the jocks put him upside down in
Yeah.
a trash can, but
But
he got anything. He got anything.
Tall, lanky guy. He was a dork. Who wrote for the school.
Got a question?
Speak to the influence of Ida Young in his life.
Enormous.
I think Ida Young is everybody's hope for project that they could find real information about. We can't even find a photograph.
We actually just got in touch with the family, so we are getting a photo of her.
Oh, fantastic.
Finally, this is like just in like the last. 6
Ida
months.
Young,
Was his mother
black man,
inessential? Yeah, his mother.
who raised him. And he was the kid, he was much younger than his siblings. He was the kid that hung out in the kitchen while she's cooking, and they're talking to each other, and he's interacting with a woman of a different race, and she is giving him, well, all of life's great advice about how to get along.
Yeah.
And he didn't get that from his parents. So I think that a lot of the sensibilities we read about in Kurt's work are rooted in Ida Young and her values. And it's interesting because Mark Twain had a similar experience. He also had a black man who is credited actually more recently with the vernacular that Twain uses in Huckleberry Finn. That he really learned the black hatter at the time in his area from his daddy. And so Kurt's always being spoken of in relationship with Kate. And it's just interesting that both of them had these black daddies who gave them a great sensibility about the world. And these were among the most repressed people in our society. So as a kid, you can present anything to a child and they'll take it in. He was lucky. He got the right ones.
The first time I interviewed him, he was telling the story. He said, yeah, when we were kids, lots of run around, I had a buddy, and we'd play in the snow all day. And then a miraculous thing would happen. His mother would get at the door and said, soup's ready. And we'd go in there and there was this bubbly, warm, fantastic soup. And I could eat all I wanted to eat of it. He said it was a miracle. I never saw my mother even open a can. So it was like, wow, this kid has a mother who cooks for him. So he was, Edith was not a good mom, apparently. And that's a deficit that, a lot
Not
of.
that she didn't want to be, but she was manic depressive
Oh, yeah.
and
Spoiled, absolutely spoiled.
spoiled. Yes.
Could not handle the change, just she enjoyed her privilege her whole life and she didn't want to let it go even after it was gone. Yeah, if we could all have good parents, if we could all have good parents, two good parents, right?
Or a black nanny.
Two good parents.
I like the fact that you brought up Heidi Young because I think that she is still undiscovered for Vonnegutians. We can't, you might get a photograph, but we have really no records about her.
What I like to see is the quality of the younger Vonnegut scholars coming along. We have a woman named Christina Jarvis. She's at Fredonia State, just close to Lake Erie in New York. And Julie asked me to introduce her on Saturday noon. And I said, well, I don't know the first thing about her. How am I going to do that? And she said, well, we'll send you the book. It's coming out this year. It's called Happy Mud, which is an allusion to Kurt Vonnegut. And I said, Julie, I don't have time to read that. I've been torn a lot of different ways, not by work, but rock and roll pleasure tour. I've been for about 3 weeks. I don't have time to do this, but I did read the first chapter, and she had written me a really nice, note to introduce herself to me, just a few lines. And I said, well, Professor Jarvis, I read the first third of your book and space, wow. No exclamation point, just wow. Because it's great. It looks at the intellectual, very young exposure of Kurt to environmentalism. And it just explains it all so beautifully and in absolutely non-phony academic language full of all kind of, it's just absolutely, the research was, rivaling yours. Not nearly as much.
I remember I first met her in Barnstable at a reading for Kurt, where he used to live. And she introduced herself to me after the event. And she said, I had this crazy idea for a book. And before she told me what it was, I said, write it. And then she did get to tell me what it was. And I said, this is an area that needs to be written about. Right now, people are writing about themes that involve capitalism, socialism. Eugene Debs, as we know, was a big influence with Kurt. But what we don't have, although we know it's all over the place, is Kurt and this environmental strain that runs through so many of the books. So I was excited that, first off, she thought I was somebody because I had written encyclopedia, so that was great. And then, you know,
Shout her intelligence.
I really, but I really felt as sort of a hidden scholar that this was like the lifetime chance I had to encourage somebody else,
Yeah.
not a student, but somebody else who wanted to take a professional look at the same things. And I felt great that she came to me and I got the chance to encourage her and she followed through on it. And you're introducing her because, and speaking with her because I deferred. I said you should do it.
Oh, well, thanks,
because
thanks a lot. I mean, here, unironically, thanks.
Mutt and Jeff, we know who I am. We know who he is.
One of the most beautiful things that Chris said among millions of beautiful things is that the earth is our only chance. And we're not treating it right. And it looks like the destroyers of the earth are going to win. And what a powerful, simple observation. Greed. America is, and much of the world, the industrial world, is absolutely on the crack cocaine
And we're
of greed.
roiling drunk on fossil fuels.
Yes, burn it up. Burn it, dig it up, burn it up, put it down, set it on fire, make money.
This scholar, sounds very interesting what she's doing. Does she get into what is probably one of the most significant intellectual forces behind it, is the free thinker
Right.
forces that of his great grandfather.
Absolutely.
And all that, that really influenced him a lot.
He said, I wasn't,
All that together.
he said, I wasn't rebelling against religion. I never had any. My ancestors were free thinkers.
Except what Ida taught her.
Well, that was a humanistic sort of thing.
And the funny thing is, like all good atheists, he could quote the Bible.
Yes, you see what it says.
It's unbelievable, you know, and it's all, I mean, Sermon on the Mount is his favorite, and that appears multiple times throughout his work.
We had
So,
one story entitled, Blessed Are the Numbskull. It was rejected.
Well, and also the happy-go-lucky girls. Blessed are the happy-go-lucky girls. Bill, I want to thank you for the tour. You took the students, you know, I was teaching teachers to teach Kurt Vonnegut like about 10 years ago. Do you remember that? You got on the bus and that was just a great tour that you took us on. It was really a highlight of their time here.
Well, that was, I cut my teeth on a 4-hour tour, Vonnegut sites in Indianapolis from the National Trust for Historic Preservation this year.
Okay.
So Julia and I worked on that. And,
Yeah, it was obvious you were a real pro.
well, thank
I
you.
learned a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you catch that reference?
Hey, 4 hours.
Well, on that happy note about the doomed earth, I wanted to thank you all for coming, but part 2. So you had cake, right? We had our speakers, our cake, and now we're going to have a tour. If you'd like to participate, and I highly recommend that you do. And Zach, what is your last name?
Amrine, which I can give a whole funny joke.
It's Amrine.
Amrine.
Are you from Brookville?
Not that I know of, no.
I grew up with Amrines in Brookville.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay, cuz. On that note, Zach's gonna show us around and I'm very grateful to our 2 speakers.
absolutely.
Thank you. All right, Zach, it's all yours.
And for me, been interested in trying to get more in Indianapolis history, particularly as it relates to the German American population here. A large part of Kurt's identity as an author, at least as I take away from it, is his struggle with American identity and German identity, particularly seen when he talks very sparingly about his time as a